Welcome back. Today I got a customer's 2006 Hyundai Sonata, and this is the V6. And with this one, she was stating that it's smoking in her cabin, and that sometimes it will smoke, over the hood as well. And she has an oil leak in the front of the engine somewhere. So after looking at it and her saying she just got smoke in her cabin the other day, and looking around, I ended up finding a glob of oil on the exhaust manifold. Now, it's all from the valve cover, and you can see it right there. It's all a little sludgy and oily, and it built up, and it just continues to burn. So it's coming from the valve cover, and that's what I've got diagnosed. And the valve cover just happens to be leaking in just this one spot, going through the firewall into the cabin. And yeah, it's just not good. So yeah, that's what we're dealing with here. That's what she's doing. So what's wrong with that? Today we're going to replace this valve cover. So I'm going to take this oil cap off. There's two bolts here, right there, two 10mm bolts, I believe, that you got to take off for this cover, and then you just nicely pop it off the back. I think the back clips on. So yeah, it comes off just like that. Pretty easy. Now you got a hose here that will need to be removed, a vacuum hose, evap, whatever it is, and you gotta move that back. I'll have to get some pliers. This hose right here, so two hoses you gotta take off from the valve cover. Still not that hard, pretty easy stuff. And you got the ignition coils. I'll be taking out the 10mm bolts holding them in. And then the connectors, they get a little tricky, but yeah, so here's the one weird part is the AC line hose or power steering hose, whatever this thing is, right here is in the way. There's a bracket right here where you can't, I forgot, but don't forget to bolt that back in, and it bolts right up right there, so you can bolt the bracket right back up. And I just bended it out the way for a second, and so here's what I tried to use. These giant pliers did not work. I was struggling, especially holding the camera. You're doing this one-handed. So yeah, didn't work for me. That was a fail. These were the pliers that I ended up having to use. Pulled the little things back, really easy, not that hard. I love those guys. And hose came right off, no problem. And I just tucked it out of the way, kind of squished it in a little spot to stay in there, out of my way. Now this harness is a little bit on the valve cover as well, so we got to get these connectors undone first, and I'll show you all what I took off with the harness. So I used that kind of a small of a skinny flathead, so aim for skinny and small to fit in there, and kind of you're gonna pry out a little clip, is all you got to do. You're just pushing a clip out, like kind of back, and I'll show you what that is. The part you're pushing out is this shiny little black piece right there, and see that? I'm using my fingers. It goes in and out, but make sure it's all the way out. Just be careful not to break it, because people do it all the time. I've done it in the past, but yeah, it just needs to come out that much or so. Make sure it's fully out though, and then you gotta give it a nice tug, because it's kind of, pretty hugged on there, kind of tight. Just with that being unlocked, it's still on there pretty good. So you gotta tug decently, a little forcefully. So yeah, just pry that back, that little clip right there, and it's that easy. All right, this is probably, in my opinion, one of the hardest parts of the job, and it was the most confusing not working on one of these connectors in these kind of cars before. So it's very interesting. There's two 10mm bolts or so holding the harness on, and then you can tuck that harness out of the way. You see the two little brackets where those two little 10mm bolts go into there, and they go into the valve cover. I don't think you needed to. I had to do this, but I ended up doing this. I just did it anyway. There's a little metal bracket that doesn't, that's kind of clips the back of that engine beauty cover. I'm going to take that off, but here's some middle bolts. You do not forget this in the valve cover. I thought there was like 3 or so, but there's more. I think there's 4 or 5 or so center valve cover bolts. So take those off. So right here is when I kind of had to push this metal pipe out the way. I did bend it a little bit, and yeah, other than that, that's basically how you take off the valve cover. You just pry it on each side. Don't forget to use RTV. I sure did. More on the timing cover area. Don't forget to search up the tightening sequence on Google, and pretty easy job. Follow, like, subscribe.